Brian, we have a really interesting pickle today.
Good.
And
I like interesting pickles.
And as I've been thinking about this, there's just so many examples that I think we're going to spend the show on examples of this stuff. So, but let me explain what we're talking about here. So this is from a chap called Brian Williams, and apparently he and his colleagues have been discussing pricing given inflation. Should they be putting their prices up? But their competition, okay, is haven't put their prices up now, so they don't want to put their prices up too much and then find out they're not competitive. And one of them come up with the bright idea that what they should do is they should keep the prices the same, but they should add some fees to it. Okay.
Yep.
And they've had this big debate about it. And what Brian's saying is that he would like our view on whether they should be adding fees instead of just putting their prices up.
Well, how flattering. Thank you, Brian. Before we dig in and try to answer this question for him, I'd like to point out, I think that this is an influence that I've had on you, Colin, over the years. You just called a pricing problem a very interesting problem. And I like to think that that's me rubbing off on you. I'm not sure how excited you would have been about a pricing problem 5 years ago before my corrupting influence.
No, I did hear the click of 27 million people switching their podcast to something else more interesting.
No. Look, I mean, inflation has been a problem for a couple of years now at this point.
Sure.
Everybody's dealing with this. And so you cannot get around it. I don't care what industry you're in. Everybody's worried about how do you raise prices so you can, keep the lights on, make enough money to, confront all these rising prices. But your customers are also confronting with rising prices. Like, it's a problem. It's a hard problem. Yeah. I'm glad that you acknowledge how interesting my research is now.
Yeah. It's just about as interesting as talking to you, mate. So,
thanks, Colin. I'm going to interpret that in the best way possible for me. And so I say, thank you, Colin.
If I can add a little bit more of a sarcastic voice to that,
please.
I will try.
Always appreciate it.
But as I've been thinking about this, I think it's really interesting, actually, because I've really been and I am getting like you, mate. I'm getting very boring because I've been
Not
thinking.
Getting boring. I'm getting to be like you, Ryan. Boring. Just so we're clear.
Yeah.
Good. Please go ahead.
I've just noticed so many additional fees.
Yeah.
So can I give you a couple of examples?
Please.
Yesterday, we were looking after one of the grandkids, and we said, "Shall we take them to the pictures, to a movie?" Yeah, okay, let's take them to the movie. Looked up, started to book online, and it came up with the price of the tickets. And in little tiny print at the bottom, it said, processing fee, I'm in England at the moment, £3. So that's about $5. And I'm thinking, you just think I'm not going to pick that up, don't you? And you've obviously have to put it in there. But you've written it so small that you don't. And I'm doing it over the bloody internet.
Yeah.
Where's the processing of that? So that was one. That made me then start to think about, and I'm sure Brian and his colleagues have had this debate. I also went to see the famous Luton Town. Have I told you this? Let me waffle on about this.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been a season ticket holder at Luton Town, football club, for years now, for 25 years. Took my kids and all the rest of that. And
you did call them famous just a minute ago. I'm going to let that slide.
Famous.
Please continue with your story.
Well, they're more famous than the Cleveland Browns. I'll tell you that, mate, for nothing.
Internationally famous Cleveland Browns. But yeah, the Lutonshire, whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
We are now in the Premiership.
Yeah.
We are now playing Manchester United, Chelsea, Manchester City, Arsenal, Tottenham.
I'm sure they will do very well.
We won't. We won't do very well. But I went to Wembley to see the playoff final Okay. Um, and again, when I booked on, and I think this was through Ticketmaster, there was like a booking fee,
Yeah.
an admin fee,
Yeah.
and a processing fee. And I'm thinking, bloody hell, I know I
There's
like
no
seeing
way.
them.
Those are three separate costs to Ticketmaster. Like, there's
No,
no
and
way.
and again, I'm online. You
Yeah.
know, just include the bloody things in the price. You
Yeah.
know, and then I'm going to give you one other example, which I think is interesting because it sort of talks a bit about this. So in England, sales tax or VAT, as we
Mhm.
call it, value added tax, is included in the price.
Right.
So you go to the store and you go, I want to buy a pen, and it's X amount of pound. That's what you pay. In the States,
Yeah.
our friends go to when they come over and see us, they go to a store and they go, bloody hell, this is cheap. And they
Yeah.
say, don't forget you've got to add sales tax. Yeah, and that where I live is 7%. So it's nowhere near the 20% that you pay sales tax in England. But the interesting bit is it stands out in the States, and you start to think to yourself, hmm, I don't really, yes, that's an attractive price, but I really don't want to pay that sales tax. Whereas in England, it's 20%, and therefore clearly, that's a lot. 10 quid, it's £2, and you're going bloody hell. £2 is going to the government, and all I'm buying is this tambourine or something that it may be for the kids. So anyway, I what from a theory perspective and from a pricing theory perspective. Hold on, let me just go and get my cushion so I can pillow
Don't
so I can
pretend
go
you
to
don't
sleep
find
because
this
you're.
fascinating, Colin. You've
Let
already
me go and
admitted
get
it.
what's happening here and what's the
Yeah.
theory behind what Brian's asking.
Yeah, so there's a reason that these fees have become so common, and so common in a time of inflation where raising prices is really tricky. So all of these fees would fit broadly under a category of theory called two-part pricing. Sometimes economists call it two-part tariffs. And kind of the canonical example would be like a razor and blade model, where you pay one upfront fee for the razor, for the handle, and then you pay an ongoing fee for each blade that you buy that goes into it. But there's other versions of it where you're just splitting up prices, right? So instead of paying a single overall price, you pay kind of a base price, and
Yeah,
then you incur a series of these fees afterwards. So that the theory that kind of explains a lot of that, including some tipping behavior, by the way, where we're splitting out that cost, that price, is this two-part or multi-part pricing. The research that's been done on this psychologically says that as annoying as we find those fees, and we do, we hate them, but as bad as we react to them as customers, we react worse to the higher upfront fees. So we can
uh,
imagine like two restaurants across the street from each other,
yeah,
and they both sell tacos. And one of them doesn't charge extra fees. And so in order to make the kind of the numbers work, they sell their tacos for $8 a piece.
yeah,
And the other one splits out, and um, they make you tip. They've got like a back of house service charge. They've got a
yeah,
processing fee if you want to use a credit card, and they sell their tacos for $5, and then there's $3 in additional fees. Overwhelmingly, people will tend to prefer, they would choose the $5 taco, right? That's
right,
like the headline price. And even in the states where we know we have to pay sales tax,
sure,
it's still like kind of back of your mind, right?
sure, yeah, I agree with that.
This is part of the trick that hard discount airlines like Ryanair,
Yeah,
um, they have this like really low baseline price.
yeah,
And then to actually fly, you need to pay an additional
yeah.
processing fee. You
Oh,
need to pay an
you want a
additional.
seat?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
you
Oh,
want
yeah,
us
yeah,
to?
exactly.
You
Oh,
want
you
us to
wanted
put
to get on the
aviation
plane?
fuel?
You wanted to go through the door to get on. Oh, that's going to be an additional 20 pounds. Like, so and when you buy the ticket, you know that that's coming,
Yeah,
right? No, nobody's surprised by this at this point.
Yeah.
Fee for checking a bag, fee for having a carry-on, fee for, being able to sit down on the plane. Like, that's coming, but somehow psychologically we discount that.
Yeah.
And we focus,
Right.
we anchor on that base price.
Right.
So the reason that firms do this, as distasteful as it is because it works.
Yeah.
We react to it psychologically more favorably than we do when the price is all bundled together. Even if you might ask people and they would say, no, I'd rather know up front what I'm paying.
Yeah.
This is one of those cases where people don't necessarily know how they will respond when they're in
So the
the
technical answer to Brian is do it.
Yes. There
Right.
are, there are exceptions, there are, caveats to it, but yeah, if we had to make a blanket statement, customers will respond better to split out fees than they would to an increase in the base price.
So let me debate this with you then, because
Please.
I enjoy a debate.
Yes. And to be clear, we all wish this wasn't true. We all wish that fees would go away. We wish that we didn't respond to them at all. We wish that we
Yes.
hated them as much as we say we do. But yeah, please,
Yes.
let's debate it.
So from a customer experience perspective, I would absolutely say this falls under what Fred Reichheld would call bad profits.
Yeah.
So it's something that they are trying to hide in the main. That, not everyone's trying to hide it, but in the main, people try to hide these things. And it leaves, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, a sour taste in my mouth.
Yes.
Yeah. And therefore, the interesting bit for me becomes the long-term effect on customer satisfaction and loyalty, and whether that has been factored into the models that you're referring to. So I can
Beautiful.
imagine if you're doing a test, then, in controlled environments, as you do, all very boring.
Yep.
And
Hey.
Sorry, I had a bad night. Um, but if you're doing a test with the two bits,
Yep.
then that would produce the results. But I presume no one's looked at the long-term implications of that, or even the implications on trust and satisfaction and loyalty and all those things.
You are absolutely correct. Yeah. So when
Can you just repeat that, mate, a bit louder, just so everyone can hear?
I'm not sure I could without like dry heaving, like without gagging in some way. No, you're absolutely correct. So when studies like this are designed, when people look at like how this responds in the marketplace, we tend to be looking at the very short term results of this, right? So
Yeah.
another way to think about it would be like these two taco shops that I explained. I was looking at this from the perspective of which one would you choose to go to, right?
Yeah.
How are you going to get people through the door? And the evidence there suggests pretty clearly that, the lower baseline price is the one that works. In terms of who enjoys their experience at the taco shop better, like how negatively do people respond to the experience of getting these like 1,000 small cuts
Yeah.
afterwards? That's kind of a different question, and
Sure.
and to your point, should be factored in. Like I don't think anybody, even if we respond more favorably to the initial low price than we do to the incorporated price, I think the question of what does that do to your experience, to your trust in the organization, these are all very good questions and ones that have not been as well researched. And so I
Sure.
think it is absolutely fair to wonder whether we
Sure.
might be poisoning the customer experience in the long
Sure.
term. Yeah.
If I was sat in front of the CEO or the C-suite, I would be suggesting that they don't do this personally,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't be backing it up with any data, but I'd be saying, in fact, what I would be saying would be, let's test it. To be honest with
Sure.
you, and let's test the longer term effects upon things.
I mean,
But it seems,
there are a couple of prominent examples going in the other direction. So, airlines, I don't know, a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago, started in the US, started adding these luggage fees, right?
yeah,
So prior, you could get like 2 bags for free. And then they started saying, no, if you're going to check a bag, we're going to charge you whatever, $50 or
Yeah.
something. And this was a two-part price, right? So you got your ticket price, but then once a couple of airlines did it, then all the rest of them started doing it too.
Sure.
And so it became just a part of the flying experience. There are exceptions though. So Southwest Airlines does not charge for that.
Sure.
And it's become a part of their advertising. They pitch
Sure.
this. This is a benefit that they offer. So there are exceptions to this where you can say, like, you are you have to incorporate these other fees.
Yes.
It was actually a member of your team that pointed me to this, but British Airways had, I don't know if they still have it on there, but they had kind of an online calculator on their website where they say, look, if you think that you're going to, fly to your destination on Ryanair for whatever price they're quoting
Yeah.
like, do you want to check a bag? Do you want to have a carry-on? Do you want to print your ticket out? Do you want to? They had all of these things, and you could select and choose and they would add on the fees that the other airlines charge for these things. And at the end of it, if you made a couple of reasonable accommodations, it turned out the prices were not actually lower. And in some cases were even higher than the price that British Airways was charging. So there are examples where you can kind of disaggregate your own price benefits or aggregate your competitors and get some advantage there.
Yeah, let's talk about another little bit of a controversial area, shall we?
Good.
Let's talk about your taco restaurant. Because there's something that's been driving me around the bend recently. All right. So I went into a restaurant the other day in the States in Sarasota, and it was like a self-service restaurant. Well, in fact, you walk up to the bar and you go, "I'll have a sandwich," and I've got salad, I think, and the guy adds all the bits, and then he gives you, and off you go. But since and because I love technology, I now do everything on my watch and pay on my watch. I hardly carry cash around, and because of that, when he flipped around the unit, it then had a tip on there.
Yeah.
Okay. And I thought, but you've done nothing.
Yeah.
And that made me start thinking about this whole subject of tipping.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it's made me start to think about the whole bit of, because people are paying electronically, and I don't know if everybody else has noticed this, the options that you get are in the States, we're typically tipping, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's between 15 and 20% typically,
Yeah, I mean, historically for restaurants, the norm was 15%.
Yeah.
Historically is a long time ago. That's grown. It's now, 20% is starting to be closer to the
well, that's the bit I'm trying to get to, which is because what it feels like what's happening is tipping is being forced up and migrated. So the minimum that you can charge now as an option, you can do the custom button and then put the custom is, I think it's normally like 18, 20, 22%. Okay. Yeah. And then there's a custom button. And I've started thinking, so there are two things there. One is organizations that haven't charged for or don't include tipping are starting to include tipping.
Yeah.
And then it's how much do you actually tip when you are faced in that situation?
Yes.
I mean, I typically tip between 18 and 20%. I have to turn around and say, they'd have to deliver my food on a platter for it to be 25% or something like that. But
yeah, no, you're right in both cases where tipping has gotten kind of out of control in the US.
Yeah.
It was always out of control in the US relative to other countries. Like American payments, we tipped for way more things and tipped more than people in other places. It was part of the...
I'll tell you what, when Americans come to Europe, the wait services love it.
I bet.
They
I
They
bet
don't
they're used to
realise.
getting no tips because that's the culture there. And then they all of a sudden they get, 10, 15, 20% for doing things in a
Yeah,
different
so
way.
in England, it's 10%, between 10 and 15%. Typically, it's 10%. In fact, I was reading a report earlier today in preparation for this that showed that it's older people that tend to tip
Yeah.
in England, and it's typically around sort of 10, 12%. But when we have American friends over, then they tip 20%. They go,
Yep.
woohoo!
Yeah. No, of course. But yeah, like it's creeping into more transactions.
Yeah,
I was in an airport just a couple weeks ago and went into a little shop to buy some bottled water before my flight. Um, and I waited in line at the checkout, and it was the same thing. Like there was no option to not tip unless you went into the custom and hit zero. Like there was this intense pressure to tip
yes,
this person who, I don't want to discount the work done by people
no,
working at a
totally,
cashier, but this was not like an exceptional level of service or anything. This was
no,
now pretty clearly just an additional fee.
yeah,
You buy your bottle of water and then you're expected to pay an additional 15, 20, 25% for the privilege of buying your water. And again,
yeah,
I had to walk over, I had to pick up the bottle of water, I had to walk it over to the cash register.
yeah,
Um, from my perspective, this is just another example of this additional fee component. So the price
sure,
of labor is part of the costs of running a business. And instead of charging prices that cover that cost, instead, increasingly firms are holding down the price of labor by underpaying their employees and instead charging an additional fee in the form of tipping to their customers, right? So
yeah,
this is just another form of
yeah.
two-part pricing.
And for those people for those people not living in the States, the average waiter waitress in the States, the money they get is appalling, basically.
Yeah, so the labor laws in the U.S. are such that we have a minimum hourly wage for most types of employees, which has not been increased since I don't know the 80s or something. Like
Yeah,
it's tragically low. But that is for typical employees. But if you work in a tipped industry, so if you are a restaurant server, for example, you don't even make the minimum wage. Instead, you make I think it's like $2.13 an hour or something. Like that's your wage, and then everything else on top of that has to come in the form of tips. So we can debate how insane that set of labor laws is, but regardless, it's kind of baked into kind of the labor laws in the U.S. And that means that tipping is no longer kind of a polite indication of exceptional service. It is a core part of people's wages. Now, like this airport kiosk worker, I assume that she is not in this special class of
well, that's
tipped
what was making
employees.
me. It was making me think, mate. Is I wonder where the break point is,
Yeah,
because
that
even
I
the
don't know.
person,
It's pretty well defined in law, as I understand it, and
sure,
so I don't think that you could get hired on, to just any job, and the employer could decide like, oh, well, then you're a tipped employee, so I only need to pay you $2 an hour. I think that
sure,
I think it is defined in law that like these certain categories, but regardless, like it is, there's now this intense, kind of moral pressure to tip employees who are paid in that way. But as you said, the amounts of the tipping has continued to increase. I think at some
yeah.
point we'll hit a breaking point, and
But
there'll be a backlash.
it does go back to an additional fee, doesn't it? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
so if I think of the as we were talking about the processing fee, the booking fees, the other one that I heard the other day, which was there was a convenience fee,
yeah.
and you
Isn't that
think to
nice?
yourself, okay, well, no, I'd rather play the inconvenient
Yeah.
fee,
I mean, the difference between tipping and these other types of fees is that tipping is, nominally optional, whereas
Sure,
these other fees, like you can't opt out of the convenience fee. That's just part of your bill. And so, where this gets a little ugly from my perspective is that, the the companies can mandate these fees. These are just baked into the price at some point. Whereas the employees who might be relying on this stuff, they still are faced with, people can choose not to tip if they don't want to. So
Sure.
there is some difference there.
Sure.
But yeah, they all fit under the same theory from my perspective.
And the other one that I think is worthy of note is that some of these fees are actually mandated by regulation. I don't know if you knew that.
Uh,
So,
well, sales tax
um,
it certainly is. But
yeah, so
there are
sales
others.
tax, but there's other ones like with our famous cable companies where they have to put on the bill. I can't remember an exact example, but they're contributing towards this, or
Right.
this
Yeah.
is a fee for that, or whatever it may be, and that's mandated in law. Yeah.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah. So for
so
some utilities, there are regulated fees for like upkeep and maintenance and development and things.
yeah, another one is like line rental. You
Yeah,
go, I'm
exactly.
paying my fees, and then I'm paying. Well, I don't want to pay a line rental,
Yeah.
so,
But
but
again, those could be baked into the headline price, right?
yeah.
So it could be that like we're charging you $100 a month and that's it. Or it could be we're going to charge you $80 a month, and then when you get your bill, there's the line rental fee and the maintenance fee and these other things.
So as I was thinking about this in a bit more depth, I was thinking, let's take the other view. Okay, let's look at it from a contrary position. And I could argue that adding additional fees or breaking down the cost adds to transparency, and the customer can then see where how their overall cost is made up. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, but that doesn't. I don't see many organisations doing that, and what I've found is we actually used to do this in at the early days of Beyond Philosophy. So when we used to sign up a consultancy agreement, we used to break down
Yeah.
every single element of it and then put a price. Yeah, and then what we found was happening was that um, customers were comparing us, understandably, against other organisations, and they were saying, "Well, can't you reduce that fee or that fee?" And you're going, "Well, with the greatest respect, that fee that you're talking about there, no, we can't reduce that. It may
Yeah.
look big to you, but actually, it's not, because you're now getting into, well, what's the definition underneath all of that?" But I guess the overall point I'm making is that you could argue breaking the fee down improves transparency, but I guess in my personal opinion, that's not the right thing to do. I would much rather have, this is the cost of it. I know what the cost is. I know I'm not being screwed. I know I don't have to look at my invoice to check that there's no bloody hidden fees there that are going to wind me up later, basically.
Yeah, and I do think there's a difference too. Like there's breaking down a price, and then there's communicating a total price piecemeal, right?
Yeah,
So you could charge $100 for something and be transparent about where that $100 is coming from or not, or you could charge $100 for something and then you could charge $80 for the same thing and then impose $20 of fees afterwards. And I think it's that dribbling out the communication of the price that's really the problem and the issue here. There may be cases for transparency, there may be cases not for. It doesn't surprise me that you had, especially for something like a consulting contract, that you had people like trying to line item veto
sure,
some of these costs, because now that seems like
sure,
an opportunity for negotiation.
sure,
Uh, but I agree. I think there are opportunities for being transparent about stuff, especially if you've got to raise prices. But there's still, like, do you frame it as a single price or do you frame it as a base price plus fees? And I think
sure,
that's a growing problem.
sure. Okay, so what would you tell Brian in a couple of sentences? What would you suggest that he does?
I think Brian needs to try to get into the heads of his customers and know what's their consideration set. If your competition is charging, $80 plus $20 in fees, and you want to be noble and say, nope, we're going to charge $100 upfront inclusive of everything, you're probably going to lose business on the front end. Because just the way people process prices, yours is going to seem like a more expensive offering. If you're in an industry where it's not clear that like everybody else is already shifting in that direction, you might have more flexibility. On average, increasing side fees as opposed to increasing base price is going to be more palatable to customers in the short term.
Sure.
I do think that it is really important for you to consider, though, that customer experience going forward. So although that the science seems to be settled that this is the best way to attract customers initially or in the short term, as we discussed earlier, it is not clear that produces the best experience and therefore the best rate of return. Sure. All those kinds of factors. So it is something that you need to balance. But on average, even though we all hate it, there's a reason that firms keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's because we respond to it whether we want to or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And just in summary, my view would be, I don't like it being done.
No.
But I would, building on what you're saying, is I would test it.
Yeah.
I would test it using having the counterbalance of the longer term effect. And I would test it not just going, well, how much are we selling? I would also test it based upon what's the experience that I've been given. And I would project both of those things out to be able to turn around and to be able to see what that analysis is.
And I think see if you can turn it into a competitive advantage, like Southwest Airlines did, or like British Airways did. Like, don't assume that these are your only options to add fees or to not. Like, are there ways that you can turn this into a differentiator and be very loud about it?
So. Yeah, that's it. Good. Okay. All right, everyone. I hope that's been of use. Hope that's helped Brian. And we look forward to talking to you next week. Okay. Cheers. Thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.